It's mailbag time, and we've got a massive trade. Stefon Diggs on his way from Buffalo to the Houston Texans. Ramifications in the draft and for, obviously, those Texans and Bills rosters. Coming at you on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there, and we love it when you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. And by the way, a lot of questions from today's mailbag episode are going to come from that YouTube channel in the comments. So make sure you comment there. Let us know you're watching. Hit the thumbs up and drop a mailbag question in there that we'll hit every Wednesday, unless otherwise noted. We do some Thursday mailbags instead from time to time, depending on what's going on in the NFL world and our schedules. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, we got a blockbuster today.
Yeah, what's that?
We're waking up to big NFL news, and this league never sleeps. It's why we can do a podcast every single day, even through the off season on the Locked On Podcast Network. And it is Stefon Diggs traded again in April. Like, this is a thing with Stefon Diggs' career now. And he goes from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans. And according to Adam Schefter, this is what the Bills will receive in exchange for the 30-year-old wide receiver. The Bills get a 2025 second-round pick, and it's actually the Minnesota Vikings second-round pick in 2025. So not this year's draft, but next year's second-rounder that started in Minnesota, traveled through Buffalo, and is now in Houston. And the Texans receive Stefon Diggs. They also get a couple late-round picks here, a 2024 sixth-rounder and a 2025 fifth-round pick, which is interesting there. So 2 day 3 picks coming back with Stefon Diggs. So the Texans get Diggs and quantity of picks. The Bills get a higher quality pick, but it's in next year's draft, and they send Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans. For the Houston Texans, it's pretty obvious. Young quarterback. They can afford to pay a veteran wide receiver. They wanted to bolster that room. They don't have to give up a pick in this year's draft at all. They can still build this thing out, and they're going and trying to win. And this D'Amico Ryan's squad in Houston is charging fast and in the AFC, and it's exciting to see how that build is going on right now. And they're just going to drop a veteran, difference-making wide receiver in that group.
So we can definitely talk about each side of it, what Diggs is as a player, but I think you nailed it. I mean, the bottom line of why a deal like this happens, and I do think it's curious that they sent him to an AFC team and maybe even an AFC contender, a team they play next year too. I mean, they're both first round. They both won their division, so they're going to be on each other's schedule. But one team has cap space and one doesn't. One has a super expensive quarterback, the other one doesn't. And Diggs is. I want to talk about him as a player first, and he's up in age. You mentioned he's 30. He's expensive, as he's deserved. I mean, he's been a great player. He's frankly a little bit of a pain in the butt. I mean, that even goes back to him coming out of college. Like, he should have been a first or second round pick, but we'll just say he's high maintenance, and he went a round or two later,
There was also an injury thing with Stefon Diggs pre-draft as well. So he tumbled all the way down, but he was a bigger time prospect than where he was drafted on day 3.
100%. And he's not for everyone. So the fantasy community, speaking of which, I mean, Kate, Marcus, and I already recorded a Locked On Dynasty today. It was all about Diggs, basically. The fantasy community will make you very aware, oh, this guy's shot. Look at his second half of the season.
Yeah.
It's really bad. I mean, the production is terrible. However, some of it, they had a coordinator change during that time. They had a philosophical change where I'm not saying Diggs was a decoy, but he was drawing so many doubles because people don't really respect Gabe Davis that they started getting the football to Cook out of the backfield and Kincaid. And I thought the Steelers actually might be in on this Diggs move. I mean, I know they've been kicking the tires on big-time receivers, so I did a lot of homework on this. I watched a lot of his end-of-season tape. I also trust Matt Harmon from Reception Perception more than anyone on the planet when it comes to receivers. He did the same. And his tape was way better than his production, during those last 8 games or whatever. He was a little unlucky. There was a little bit of philosophical changes. I'm not saying he's still a top 3 or 4 or 5 receiver, but he might be 8th, 9th, or 10th.
He's still a good player. He's 30 years old. He's not 35, but
Right.
he's on the back 9 of his career. And if he's a headache, and you can see that with the extra picks thrown in on both sides, what the value is of a player like that. And it can be this is for sure a short-term thing for the Houston Texans, right? And if they lose a future pick, it's not really a big deal there. By the way, I said earlier, the pick went through Buffalo, went through Houston. I'm trying to think what was the second round pick that Houston had that was Minnesota's pick that they gave up in 2020?
Had to be for this most recent deal, right? With
right.
Yeah.
So Houston, right? So they got the pick in that deal that Minnesota traded up because they gave the second round pick in this and next year's draft, right? Was there 2 seconds?
I think that's right. I think it was 2 seconds for this late-ish first.
So the flip job there was Houston moving down. They get Stefon Diggs as part of that move down into the second round now as well, and get an instant contributor there. And he might be around for a couple years. Yeah. They can restructure what his contract currently is because he's got a big deal that he signed in Buffalo. But they can, cap wise, it doesn't hurt even Houston that much because they aren't the team that gave the big signing bonus and all that. There's dead money involved for the Buffalo Bills, but for Houston, they can restructure if they need to and figure out that contract. And if he does decline age 32, whatever, you move on. It's not a big deal. And you're probably drafting and developing other guys. I think part of the equation as far as now from Houston is Tank Dell's injury, because there was a report recently that Tank Dell's injury might be pretty serious, and come back. It's not guaranteed that he's going to be the exact same guy he was to start last year to start this year. It might take him some time, and who knows what that is. And he's a young player anyway, so I think they needed to add to that receiver group for the Houston Texans. So this is a perfect fit as far as you get a player who can make a difference right now today, and you worry about later.
Yeah, let's talk about it from a Houston perspective. Go to break. Talk about it from a Bills perspective, because I think you nailed it. Because it could be as easy as we have the money. We're trying to win this whole thing with a rookie quarterback, push some chips into the middle, but it's still not that cost prohibitive where it's going to screw us over if it doesn't work. But if you look a little deeper, and you mentioned it, Dell is coming off a pretty serious injury. He's one of the smallest people in the league. Do you trust him to be a durable player? And to take it a step further, BP, Nico is a free agent after this year. So if I'm his agent, I'm looking at big money for Nico. If he could double down on what he did last year, maybe they don't see him the same way. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to be not an easy contract negotiation for Nico. And maybe they franchise him, whatever. But those two have stuff going on with them.
And even if you look at Nico Collins and the timing of where the contracts are, and I talked about how you could restructure Diggs and make that work for you, just a simple restructure and push some money down the road if you wanted to. But, the Houston Texans are in a pretty good cap situation, so they might want to absorb everything they can now so that if you sign a new deal next year with Nico Collins and then backload that, well, now we're talking 2 years down the road before big money even starts to hit anyway. So I think they can keep those two contracts together for, 2 years without any problem. So maybe that's the plan too, is knowing they'll pay one of their wide receivers and they'll be paying one at a time essentially in Houston.
No, I think you're right. Especially because Stroud's cheap for a while.
Yeah. Options really is what it boils down to. Real quick on the draft pick compensation. So, this is interesting because someone asked the question, getting into the mailbag portion of this, somebody asked with the compensation, why so little for Stefon Diggs, expecting maybe first round compensation or something like that. And when you're looking at a second round pick for next year, generally that's thought of as a third round pick from this year, right? You subtract 1 round for a pick 1 year down the road, basically. So a 2 next year is worth a 3 this year is kind of the thought.
And Houston had 2 of them now,
and they had an extra, right? But when you think about Minnesota's pick, they're going to start either Sam Darnold for more, or all or any of the season, or a rookie quarterback. So I don't think that really applies here because that could be a high pick, right? That
I didn't know it was Minnesota's until we started talking because I assumed it was Houston's, which I'm thinking might be 32 in the second round.
So I don't know if I would even apply that. like you have to wait a year to use it, which is why you apply that sort of devaluing of a round. But Minnesota's pick could be 33 next year that they're getting, and the Houston
much like Minnesota's and Houston's is the bottom line.
And the Houston Texans second rounder this year is later in the round. So but obviously they didn't give up one of their early second rounds this year. So this is interesting compensation. Then with the two day 3 picks coming back, it's not worth a lot when you look at what that what the chart says about those. But clearly, they thought Diggs was not even worth a second round pick. So I would say it's essentially somewhere around third round pick value with the other late round picks coming in, and maybe even a little less than that. So 200, 150 points on the old Jimmy Johnson trade chart essentially is what we're talking about here for.
You have to consider the money, and you have to consider his age. And I also think that as across the board offseason trend, veterans got traded for less than we might have expected. Like, I know Stefon Diggs is better than Deontay Johnson or Jerry Jeudy, but those guys went for, I think Jeudy went for like a 6 and a 7. Johnson went for a player and bump up from.
And then Jeudy got a contract, which was more than what you'd expect for what they gave up to get him in trade.
Right. I think they'll regret that
with the Jeudy contract. But Diggs got more than Keenan Allen, got more than like Amari Cooper did in the past. So it's actually pretty decent return. The Houston Texans were traded for a player they think has value. So this is not a bad return, I think, for the Buffalo Bills with where they were at, with where Diggs is at, probably wanted out. And I to be honest with you, I kind of like the move for both sides. The question becomes, are the Buffalo Bills blowing it up? How do they get out of this? What is the outlook for the Buffalo Bills next? More questions about, draft ramifications here for these teams, quarterback trade values, and some responses to our dueling mock drafts from yesterday's episode coming up next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals on the Game Time app. All-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. I've used Game Time, and it was super easy before they were the authorized marketplace of Major League Baseball to get some last-minute tickets to go see my San Francisco Giants here, pop over the bridge, and you're there. Last minute, you can even get tickets up to an hour after your event starts. Not just sports tickets either. Football, baseball, basketball. We're talking concerts, comedy shows, theater events, whatever it is near you, you can find those seats and killer last-minute deals at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for 20. Locked On NFL is the code for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This is one of the big questions I've been seeing this morning to us, Matt, and it is, are the Buffalo Bills blowing it up? Are they going to go now trade for another veteran? They've got a hole. They already lost Gabe Davis as well, right, in free agency. So what is this team doing at wide receiver as the roster stands now? And are you just going to throw a bunch of draft picks at it and hope that you get somebody to develop early? Because the Buffalo Bills are still a team that should be able to contend now with a superstar quarterback.
Yeah, and we all knew that Houston was going to get better this offseason. They got dramatically better. They're much better on paper than we saw them last, which is impressive. I think the writing was on the wall that the opposite was going to be true for the Bills too. They have a lot of contracts. They lost both those safeties that they've trusted for years, things like that. You knew Gabe Davis wasn't going to be back. And they, to me, are noticeably worse on paper. Now, I think when they traded for Diggs, that accelerated Josh Allen's career greatly. It was a very, very smart move. AJ Brown to the Eagles, Tyreek to Miami.
Yep.
But I think this is a lot like the Tyreek move. When you get to Mahomes Allen level and you're making that kind of money, well, now you need to elevate the Rashee Rices and Kahir Shakirs and Dalton Kincaids of the world, because that's you're Superman. That's what your job is now. And we talked about this on Locked On Dynasty. Like, I think Kincaid's going to catch 1 million passes. I think Cook's going to catch a lot of passes. I think that Curtis Samuel signing was kind of sneaky. But at a minimum, I think they draft a receiver at the end of the first round, whether that's Worthy or Franklin. But I think they'll be in the market to trade up for A.D. Mitchell or Thomas from LSU.
That was my initial thought.
Yeah.
Okay, Khalil Shakir, and I like him a lot.
I like him. Yeah.
Samuel, you have Dalton Kincaid, you have James Cook. You named all those options, and stocked up for a lot of those players, right? Those are underneath guys, all of them.
Yeah.
Josh Allen and his arm talent with Brian Thomas Jr. and he's kind of a one-trick pony. And if there's no better landing spot now, if I was attaching a player to a prospect in this draft, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, because his archetype doesn't have great success in the NFL. Like, that's a boomer bust prospect most times. The Brashad Perrimans, Denzel Mims from a couple of years ago, right? The linear downfield guys, unless you're Randy Moss, you got to go to I think my comp for him is Will Fuller, like a taller Will Fuller. And that'd be great if he becomes that. But
he only really runs like 3 or 4 routes at LSU.
And he's great. He's not a complete route tree guy.
He's not going to out route you to death. Right.
And if you want to look at draft busts, find guys who are, 6'3" that ran super fast at the combine. And the hit rate's not amazing for a lot of these guys, surprisingly. But if I had to bet on him to succeed, putting him in Buffalo is probably the best spot for him. So, and I don't think you have to get up that high necessarily for Brian Thomas Jr. But A.D. Mitchell's another one. Great ball skills, can get down the field. So I think those two are the ones that if you're the Buffalo Bills, you might be in the market to move up a little bit. I don't know how high you can get up. Could they go get Rome Odunze?
See, that's what I was going to bring up too, is you could probably stay put and get Worthy or Franklin. It's not bad. I'm kind of anti-Worthy in the first round, but in that team, that's kind of exciting.
Talking about pick 28, like I didn't even consider Worthy. That's actually a great spot for him now. And to be honest with you, from this day forward, that will be the most popular mock pick. Probably is Xavier Worthy.
I think that's what I had him in my last one too.
And that was before the trade.
Before the trade.
Yeah.
But could they Julio Jones it and get to 8 or 9 for Odunze? I think I had Atlanta trading out of their spot in our dueling mock drafts yesterday. Go check that out, because
8.
Instead of taking, I think the Bears would just take Odunze, but 8 might be like, we'll take
neighbors
some future stuff.
Falling to pick 8. Could the Bills go from 28? And with their cap situation, is it smart for them? Because that's going to cost you a future first round pick, obviously, to get up that high.
And
pick 28. Would a team be willing to do that? You've got extra second round picks next year to play with as well. You didn't have to. Let's see. Buffalo doesn't have. Did Buffalo do a trade that lost them a pick in this year's draft? I'm trying to think. They still have all of their.
I don't think so.
Picks, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So they've got enough capital if they wanted to get up a little bit. Actually, that ties into one of our questions here from the YouTube comments, and this one goes from. This was from Relative Time Works in the comments on YouTube, and we were talking about in our dueling mock drafts how chalky that number 7 pick is for the Tennessee Titans. It's like something has to happen, right? Like Joe Alt to the Titans.
Easy,
7. It can't be that easy that everyone in the world sees this coming. Tennessee Titans fans are already like making custom jerseys, Alt jerseys in Tennessee Titans colors, right? But he says in the comments here, Tennessee will be a key player in this draft. Absolutely no one is looking at this. The Titans are a consensus lock to take OT. This draft has many, all caps, quality offensive tackles. It would be wasteful for them to stay at number 7. What about the Bills going all the way up to 7 or another team going up to 7 to draft either Alt or one of these wide receivers to get in front of, some of those teams that could pick them after that? I didn't think about that as the Titans, the team moving out of pick 7. I was thinking about another team getting Alt in front of them and changing what's going to happen. But what about the Titans moving out? What about Titans-Bills swap?
Interesting. Yeah. It seems like you just chalk Alt in there, and that's great. But you have a phenomenal O-line coach. You don't need 7th overall players. You could have 2 or 3 second, third round guys. Let the old man develop them, while the kid runs the team, and add a corner or add a pass rusher. The defense is far from perfect. I wonder if I were the Titans, would I rather have two tackles, one of them with the 25th pick and one of them in the 3rd round than Alt. You know what I mean? Or two high pedigree linemen that aren't the elite ones.
And the question becomes, on draft day, you're the Titans. You love Joe Alt, I'm sure.
Sure.
Are you one Joe Alt away from being where you need to be as a franchise? Or could
definitely not
extra first-round picks put you in that spot? And by the way, we don't know if Levis is the guy yet. What about an extra first-round pick in next year's draft? If Levis blows up, maybe you still are looking for a quarterback.
Good point. So, yeah, maybe they are more open to offers than we just assume they'll take tackle number 1.
More mailbag questions about what quarterback values are right now in the NFL draft trading, and what about are we underselling what Russell Wilson could be as a quarterback in this league going forward in his future? More from the Peacock and Williamson mailbag next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The sports calendar is loaded in April, and FanDuel is making it even easier to be in on any of the amazing action and tons of excitement at FanDuel right now, because new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. That's $200 extra to play with and bet on the tourney, on Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL getting close to the playoffs, and of course, tons of NFL draft props as well. What position your specific team will take. Those props are already up at FanDuel for the NFL draft, and tons more to come. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Getting back into the mailbag here. This is a mailbag question from Steven and on the YouTube comments, and he's talking about a conversation we had about what the value of the #1 pick in the draft is, and what players in the NFL we would trade, say, the #1 pick in the draft for. And it's a short list, 3 or 4 guys are on it, Mahomes and Josh Allen and those types.
If you're the Bears, if you're the team that owns the top pick,
right? If you're the Bears, and the known commodity, the Bears would trade for Patrick Mahomes and his contract all day long versus Caleb Williams, because you're just kind of hoping on one side, what you're getting on the other side, and it's so important to have that quarterback and know that you have that quarterback, especially with the hit rate in the NFL draft. But
they probably wouldn't do it for Jalen Hurts,
right, exactly.
Yeah, so there's a line
on a past mailbag, and he wants to add to that, and he wants to say, okay, well, what would you have to add to Jalen Hurts? And he actually brings up Brock Purdy, who's had a lot of success right now in the NFL. How many first round picks do you have to attach to Brock Purdy to get to, say, Josh Allen or Justin Herbert? Like, let's say new regime in Charger land, right? Jim Harbaugh says, I'm going to go a different direction at quarterback. What do you have to add to some of these other quarterbacks to get to Justin Herbert to make Jim Harbaugh consider moving off of Justin Herbert if he had any inkling at all to do so? What do you think, Matt? My short answer on this is you want, and I've talked about this in the past with people talking about, and this came up with the Niners and, Purdy and them trading up for Trey Lance. There's a lot of the conversation has been about, starting the new clock of a rookie contract with Caleb Williams instead of Justin Fields being the reason why you would make that move. It's like, no, the goal in the NFL is not to have a cheap quarterback. The goal is to have a great quarterback.
Great.
So for me, I say flat out no. I don't care if you're attaching first round picks to Brock Purdy. I'm going to keep the guy I think is more of a difference maker. You can throw a first round pick with Jalen Hurts and say, okay, give me Justin Herbert, give me Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, whatever it is. And I'm saying, no, who is the best quarterback? That's the side of the trade I want.
There's probably a way better example in this, and I'm sure there's, proverbs about it, but I don't want no number of crumbs equals a sandwich. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just keep giving me, there's no number in 7th round picks you can give me. There's no number of, I understand firsts and Hurts and Purdy's and these guys are worth more. They're not crumbs, but I've got the thing I want. The whole goal is for me to get this thing. You can't just give me a bunch of pieces and parts. You know what I mean? They don't all add up to the same.
It's a great point, and I've never thought of it that way, as the crumbs don't make a sandwich. I love that, But
like enough pennies make a dollar. That's not to say that doesn't work. You know,
it's the Madden. I don't know if you ever played Madden football, but back in the day, you could just you have two sides of the trade. It's like it's a weighted scale, and you're trying to get this player on Madden from the computer managed team. You just keep adding stuff to the other side until it tips, and finally you're like, okay, here's another fourth. Here's another scrub ass player. Here's another, and finally you're like, okay, good. I got the player I wanted. That's not how it works, especially with quarterbacks in the NFL. You have a great quarterback, you want the great quarterback, period.
So, I mean, like if it's fantasy, I can't give you 8 Shakirs for Tyreek. Khalil Shakir. I just killed his name, right? Or 8 Tyler Boyds for Tyreek Hill. Right.
Absolutely. Last one here. This is about Russell Wilson. And Aaron on YouTube says, Russell Wilson was not good last year. Come on, guys. Taking umbrage to something we've said here on the podcast. And he says, I'll take 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions all day. 0 red zone pass touchdowns to 1 interception. Wait, 20. No, I don't know. He's little typo there. 20, is he saying 20 red zone pass touchdowns too?
I think so.
Okay, so did he have 20?
I know he was good in the red zone. I don't know what his TD interception numbers were.
That's wild. Did he have only 6 touchdowns that were not thrown in the red zone? That's got to be.
I don't know. Maybe we should ignore that part. I'm not sure.
I mean, that's possible, but doesn't that feel like it's skewed? I mean, I know most touchdowns do come from when you're snapping the ball inside the 20.
Sure.
But that feels like
because he is a good deep passer.
Yeah. Anyway, to 1 interception in the red zone.
Okay.
So those are the stats he's throwing out there. He says Broncos were terrible. I'm looking forward to what he can do with a decent running game and a great defense. He expects big things with the Steelers. Saying everyone's too low on Russell Wilson is the idea here from Aaron. What do you think, Matt?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, so he had 26 to whatever he had 26 touchdowns and they benched him the last 2 games so he didn't get hurt. I mean, we know how that went. The Steelers had half of that all of last year. They had 13 touchdown passes over 17 games. He had double that over 15 games. And I'm not kicking him on his way out the door, but Kenny Pickett's thrown 13 touchdowns his whole career. I mean, like, touchdown passes are a very welcome addition to my hometown. Like we haven't had touchdown passes in a long time. I mean, it's crazy.
Just being more productive than what Kenny Pickett's passing offense was is not the makings of a great quarterback.
No, I mean that's
a low bar.
That's 5 Tyler Boyds doesn't equal a Tyreek Hill either. I mean, it doesn't mean but I do think there's no doubt, no matter who the quarterback is, there'll be more mistakes at the quarterback position in Pittsburgh because Kenny never turned the ball over because, I mean, they just kept them under wraps, and there will be way, way, way more big plays. So studying Wilson with the Broncos, his first year there, everything was horrible. He was horrible. The system was horrible. He was awful. I think him and Sean Payton couldn't be a worse mix. They didn't pick each other. They inherited each other. They were bought, and many of his completions were at or behind the line of scrimmage. He's about the least willing to throw between the numbers in the entire league. But I thought he wasn't bad. When I went back and really watched the tape after he became a Steeler, he's still an NFL average quarterback. He has obvious strengths and weaknesses. He still takes too many sacks. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way as much as he used to. He's a very good deep passer, understands the game. His head is sharp, and I thought he was a terrible fit in Sean Payton's system too.
I think there's, the two sides to that. There's a little homerism and optimism, expecting an MVP version of Russell Wilson.
You're not going to get that.
Built more like the old Seahawks were, and I buy that. And I buy that he's maybe not garbage, and he's one of the better. He's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the world. I can buy that, but
BP, how I've explained it to people with Wilson is they need to get him back to second, third year Wilson, where it's Marshawn Lynch, it's a Legion of Boom, and he makes some plays. And in this instance, he won't be as athletic or as dynamic as that version, but he'll be smarter.
And he can still get out of the pocket and make a throw down the field in the bucket to George Pickens. And
hopefully somebody else
is going to be, I don't know, maybe they're running a lot of 2 tight ends. Who knows? We'll find out there with the Pittsburgh Steelers there. But a lot to be determined. And I still think, especially maybe in the red zone too, stealing some of those touchdowns away. Justin Fields is going to play a role here with the Steelers.
No, I think so too.
I think
Yep.
so. It's not a slam dunk that Russell Wilson is just going to be the guy, even though he's acting like the guy already and playing the role as we know he would already be. I'm sure he's doing calisthenics on the airplane and all that. We'll find out how things go in Pittsburgh. We'll find out how things
can't just harp on the number 13 enough. They had 13 touchdown passes all last year between three quarterbacks, and Pickett has 13 for his career over 2 years. That's
There's almost nothing
unbelievably
they
low.
can do to have a worse passing offense from that sort of production.
Right.
Whether it was just a new coordinator, any new quarterback, whatever it is, it has to be better.
I mean, if the Steelers throw 22 touchdown passes last year, they might have won 2 more games. I mean, that's a low number for a team.
Who will be the receivers in Pittsburgh? Who will be the receivers in Buffalo? We will find out a lot of that information, I think, on draft day. And of course, more mailbags. Let us know your questions about the NFL draft and the NFL every week here at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or in the YouTube comments. Back tomorrow, right here, Peacock and Williamson.